Hi friends, this is Diane from bohostamper.com, and I'm going to share today a video on how I made this birthday card. I used the Art Gallery stamp set, which will be new, coming out in the January to June mini catalog beginning next week. And I'm using a Misty Moonlight card base that started out as an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock that I did cut in half and then scored again to make a 5.5 inch by a 4.25 inch side folding portrait card. I'm using the In Color Designer Series paper 6x6 squares, and there are some samples here of Misty Moonlight and the Magenta Madness, Cinnamon Cider, Bumblebee, and just Jade. I chose the Misty Moonlight scripty design to coordinate with my card base. And in between the card base and the Designer Series paper, I've cut a piece of Whisper White at 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I'll list all of the sizes and papers in the comments below. So to get started, I'm going to take my Designer Series paper. This is the original design, and this paper I used was from some of the new Designer Series paper coming out also in the catalog, Flower and Field. But for our demonstration, I decided just to use the In Colors. Those might be something that you'd look into getting and having the colors on hand. I took a scrap of Whisper White and my Art Gallery stamp with the flower. This is a two-step stamping, and you can kind of practice with it and see if you prefer to stamp the outline first or the inside color first. I've done it both ways with the photopolymer stamps. I think either one is easy enough to do. In this case, I stamped the outline first, and then I took the fill stamp with the same color of Misty Moonlight, stamped it off once, and then lined it up, stamped again. And it's a really artsy look. I like that it doesn't have a black outline design around the pattern and just looks like it's hand painted on the paper. I am going to cut this out with a circle die cut, but I don't want this. I don't want the image to be right in the center of the die, so I'm stamping it first and then we'll die cut it. I used the same Misty Moonlight ink to stamp Happy Birthday on another scrap of Whisper White, and I did that in the middle of the paper because I'm also going to die cut that. While I'm at it, I just cut another piece of Whisper White at 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 to use on the inside, and grab the other stamp out of the set that's just a small bouquet of flowers. I inked it in Misty Moonlight, stamped it off once. Because this is a new stamp and I hadn't used it again, I did it a couple of times to make sure I get a nice image. So I stamped it off once and then stamped down in the bottom right hand corner just for a little design on the inside. And then I took out the other sentiment stamp that says I'm thinking of you, and also stamped that in Misty Moonlight on the inside. I can set this panel aside and then continue on with the rest of the front of my card. So I'm done with the Misty Moonlight. I need to add some leaves to my flower, and for this I'm going to use just Jade. I'm using the stem and leaf stamp that is in the same set. Inked up my stamp, and then I stamped off once and lined it up underneath the flower Now when I go to use my circle die, I'm going to try to line it up so that my image fills the whole circle and I don't have a whole lot of white space around it. So I'm going to use our little mini emboss and die cutting machine. This also will be available beginning January 5th. This is a smaller version of the large stamp embossing and die cutting machine. This one is real handy. I keep it right beside me when I'm stamping, and I really have gotten a lot of use out of it already. You could fit about a 3.5-inch wide piece of paper through this one. So I think I did trim my scrap down a little bit just so that I could fit it easily through the die cutting machine. I have my base plate on the machine, and then I have a number 2 plate, my stamped image, my die, and a second number 2 plate, and then I can run it through the die cutting machine. It's really a very smooth and easy cutting machine. It looks like I'm struggling here because I'm not left-handed and I'm trying to run this through with my left hand until I eventually give up and just switch hands. There we go. And it's much easier. While I have this out, I'm going to die cut the happy birthday greeting. And for this, I'm using the stitched oval shape that comes in this die set. It's always handy to have some geometric dies. They're easily used for any card that you're going to make. For some reason, the oval one's very staticky, and so to hold it in place, I just took a small piece of washi tape, and I'm just going to tape that to the outside edge of the die and make it stay in place. Now I can cover it with my second number 2 plate and run it through the die cut machine. The circle that I used for the image was about a 3-inch circle, and this oval was about 2¼ inches. I can set my die cutting machine aside now. We're finished with all of those, and we can start putting the card together. So we have our stamped flower, we have our greeting, and this is the die set that I use quite frequently, the stitch shapes dies. If you don't have dies or a die cutting machine, this is still a card that you can make for any occasion. You can cut your stamped image just in a square, or you could fussy cut around it. If you have some die cuts or some chipboard designs that you want to use on your card, you can use them as well. Your greeting can just be trimmed out into a rectangular sentiment strip to add to the front of your card. It doesn't necessarily have to be an oval. I have some other sentiments set aside that came from our the new upcoming Many Messages die and stamp set. And you could use any shape you want to on the front of your card. I do find that having the stitch shape dies is really a handy tool. So now I'm going to take the Designer Series paper that we have already cut out of our in color package. Use a little multi-purpose glue and adhere that to the front of the Whisper White panel. If you're using different colors and you don't have necessarily the Whisper White, or you wanted to use maybe red or something behind the Designer Series paper, I think I would coordinate the oval and the circle to that back panel. My card actually was inspired by a swap card from Laura Bird. I've taken a piece of white ribbon and we're going to adhere that to the back of the Whisper White and the Designer Series paper that are now glued together. I just put a little bit of tape runner. In this case, I'm using Stampin Seal Plus. Line my ribbon up evenly across the bottom of the card. And then I had some Misty Moonlight with a little bit of a glitter thread through it. And I'm going to layer that on top of the white. So I'm laying down a little bit of tear tape on top of the white ribbon so that I can put my twine across the middle of the white. You can use any stamp set that you have, any Designer Series paper. If you don't have designer paper, you can always make your own. Take a piece of white and just stamp a background on it. Create your own designer paper. I'm adding the second layer of ribbon here. This is the Misty Moonlight and the silver thread. And I'm going to use another piece of the tear and tape to lay across that twine because I don't want it to unravel and possibly pull out from between the layers once the card is all put together. If I can get the release paper off of the back of the tape, we're in good shape. All right, now I'm just going to use a little bit more of the multi-purpose glue. And then layer my white panel onto the card base. This will leave another very small border around the white. And then I just use a large acrylic block and lay on top of it while I'm getting my next pieces ready. That'll help hold my paper in place. On my Happy Birthday oval, I'm going to add some foam dimensionals, and I'm going to add those across the top and the bottom of my oval and leave the center section open so that when I lay that across the ribbon, it's nice and even and doesn't kind of wobble over top of that. Take the release papers off of the dimensionals, and we'll be ready to center that. Okay. Now I just center it in the middle of the card over the ribbon, and we can get our stamped flower image ready. I'm going to add foam dimensionals to the back of this as well. Now the Art Gallery bundle, the stamp set does have a Floral Gallery die set. I chose not to die cut my flower out because I wanted the circle die cut to be dimensionalized, and I didn't want to make another layer of cardstock and bulk it up too much. So So I just wanted to stamp on my circle. You could very easily stamp your flower onto a piece of Whisper White and then use the dies to cut the flower out. Maybe just add the flower to the center of the card rather than spotlight it in a circle. I have some white enamel dot embellishments here. If you have some designed shapes or dots that you want to add, it looks very pretty without anything, but embellishments are always a good feature. I'm just going to add the inside panel to my card using my Stampin' Seal Plus, which is a really strong adhesive. Center the white panel inside our card, and there we have it. I hope you're inspired and go out and make a card to make another person smile. Thanks!